So back in January, the fighting game community was taken by storm by one particular game, and surprisingly it was a licensed anime fighter of all things. These games aren't usually inherently bad, but in the circle of the FGC, don't be surprised if a Naruto or a Dragon Ball game is ridiculed. So what is it that makes Dragon Ball FighterZ stand out among its anime game peers? Well, for starters, the company behind the game's development was Arc System Works. Now that fact in and of itself isn't anything special. In fact, they've previously worked on other Dragon Ball games such as Extreme Butoden on the 3DS, which was released to lukewarm reception. Rather, it's the fact that they approached Dragon Ball FighterZ by asking, what if we took our Guilty Gear engine and slapped Dragon Ball characters on it? And here we are today. The success of Dragon Ball FighterZ is no joke. It even pushed Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite out of EVO. However, as I've made clear in the previous review, I am far from an advanced fighting game player. To be honest, I'm a complete scrub, even a button masher at times. However, I'm a huge fan of Dragon Ball, so I still wanted to get my hands on this game, but consider this your warning. If you came wanting a deep analysis from someone who's been mastering these games since birth, sorry, you just won't get that from me. However, if you still want to hear my scrub-ass ramble on about this game, then let's continue. The gameplay for Dragon Ball FighterZ is more unique than one might expect. Compared to your typical Dragon Ball games, FighterZ has a much more traditional gameplay style, while still having mechanics of its own to make it stand out. You have light, medium, and heavy attacks that can be chained together to make combos, in addition to a homing chase and a dragon rush that can break guard. Like any good fighting game, you have super moves that can be pulled off by doing a quarter circle forward or backward motion and pressing one of the attack buttons. This is the case for every character in the game, but don't let that fact fool you into thinking that once you've learned one character, you've learned them all, as each character still has their own unique quirks. There's also an auto combo system present in the game, and while usually it's an optional mode in other Arc Sys games, here it's on at all times, and honestly, I don't mind it. It gives people who just don't have the time to sit and learn the ins and outs of a character the ability to do some flashy stuff, while also not putting hardcore players at a disadvantage. FighterZ hits a near perfect balance in making a game that's not only accessible to genre newcomers, but also FGC veterans. The control is just as responsive as one would hope while offline. Playing with other players online, however, can introduce varying degrees of input latency depending on you and your opponent's connection quality. In fact, the online honestly can be the worst part of this game at times. It's not too bad when playing with friends, but when playing with random people online, it can potentially be a mess. It can take forever for the game to find you a match, and when the stars perfectly align and you get into a match, the lag at times can be so bad that it just isn't fun. The game tries to make up for this by allowing you to set a certain amount of lag in the training mode, which is acceptable when there's 2 or 3 frames of lag, but when it gets up to 15 or 20 frames, that's a little ridiculous. Also, I feel that setting up matches with friends is more complicated than it should be. First of all, you have to make sure that you and your friends are in the exact same lobby as you, and then you have to set up a ring match. I don't understand why you can't just go in and select your friends' names from a list and just instantly start a match from there. When the game launched, the ring matches didn't even work properly at all, but I believe by this point they've been fixed for the most part. But maybe you don't really care to get involved with the online offerings of the game, and that's totally understandable. Thankfully, the game has plenty of offline modes to keep you occupied, with the main draw being the story mode. Unlike a majority of Dragon Ball games, the story of FighterZ has you play through an original story, which is nice, but as a whole, it sure is something. The whole story revolves around this new character named Android 21, who wants to turn all of the powerful warriors we know and love into sweet treats for her to devour so that she can power up and take over the world, I guess. Honestly, I skipped most of the cutscenes. This mode is split into 3 different arcs, where you have to traverse several different boards fighting different opponents to gain experience. It's sort of like a combination of Budokai 2 and Budokai 3's story modes, but it's really mundane, especially if you try to fight all of the opponents on each board instead of just making a beeline to the end boss. For the most part, the opponents you'll face in the story mode are complete pushovers. The majority of my time in this mode was spent just spamming the light attack button over and over. It was also like this at times in the Budokai games, but there were usually at least a few fights that would keep you on your toes, and you actually needed to take advantage of your character's moveset. Here, however, pretty much every fight could be taken care of using the same strategy over and over again. The only thing you really get from playing through the story is unlocking Android 2021 as a playable character, and that's it. I think it would have been better if there were more characters to unlock as you went through the story mode instead of just the one. It kind of makes it feel like it was all a waste of time. And then there's your standard plain Jane local battle mode. You know, just as it sounds, grab a second controller and a friend and just enjoy some fun lag-free battles. Or if you just want to do a quick match against the CPU, you can do that as well. Then there's my personal favorite mode, the arcade mode, where you go through different tiers of opponents to try and get the highest rank possible. It's a lot of fun to try out different characters and see how high you can keep your rank because, unlike the story mode, the CPU here can actually put up a good fight. If you want to polish up on your skills, or just learn the basics of the game, then you'll want to head into the practice mode where there's a really good tutorial for learning all the game's mechanics, some advanced combo challenges, and just the training that comes standard in fighting games. I've gotta say, I love the tutorial here. It doesn't take up much time at all and is very effective in teaching the basics. The combo challenges, on the other hand, can be a little cumbersome. They start off simple enough, but then they just get insane, and I really can't see any practical use for these. It just seems like it's more for the spectacle, but I did manage to clear all of the combo challenges for the base roster, and oh god did it hurt my poor thumbs. In terms of presentation, the game is just nothing but eye candy. Guilty Gear's engine lends itself well for Dragon Ball, and the integrity of Akira Toriyama's original artwork is most definitely preserved and then some. For a fighting game, the animation is top notch. It's never noticeably choppy, but also never too smooth to put competitive players at a disadvantage. The only thing that kind of bothered me with the visuals were the mouth animations. This is an issue that I also have with Guilty Gear Xrd. It just looks like they're all saying blah 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 blah. The music is fine, but I never really paid much attention to it. It just didn't stick out as much as the Budokai games. But at least the tracks here aren't plagiarized. I hope. If you're just dying to get even more out of the game, there have been several pieces of DLC released for the game, and more coming in the future, but the pricing of said content is a little ridiculous. If you want access to all of the DLC characters as they become available, you will need to purchase the Fighter's Pass, which costs $35. It's a little insane considering you can get whole games for that price. If some of the DLC characters don't tickle your fancy, then you can just buy who you like for $5 a piece. I myself do have the season pass because I'm just a shill, and so far I'm a little mixed on the selection of characters. It's nice to see characters like Cooler and Broly in the mix, but then we have characters like Zamasu and Vegito Blue that just seem kinda redundant. Though to contradict myself a little bit, Sayonara Goku and Vegeta are really cool additions, but honestly they should have been there from the start. In terms of other DLC, there's some cheap cosmetic stuff that might be worth spending gift card residue on, and then an anime music pack that's $15. And I love the anime's OST, but FighterZ isn't the first fighting game to have overpriced DLC, but that doesn't necessarily justify it either. But there's enough content in the base game that it isn't such a huge issue. But if any of the content sounds enticing to you, you may want to wait a few months for the inevitable Dragon Ball FighterZ Ultimate Edition, or whatever Bandai's gonna call it. Overall, Dragon Ball FighterZ is a great game, and no matter what skill level you're at in this genre, you're going to have a lot of fun duking it out as your favorite Dragon Ball characters. It's not perfect, but that's all the more room for ArcSys to make improvements for the sequel, and I most certainly will look forward to it. Maybe by that time, I won't be a scrub anymore. Well, maybe it's not fair to ask for miracles, eh? This has been FumeiCom, and I'll see you folks at the same time, same place, different game.
Hurricane を起こす